what more precisely is, how can we put this doubt? And one possibility would be, I think, something like this. And if I had a blackboard here, I would write on it. Something like this. The suggestion is that the conditional probability of a proposition R, namely that our cognitive faculties are reliable, given naturalism and evolution, call that N and E, that conditional probability is low. Now, conditional probability, this is a notion that we all employ all the time. So, for example, you might ask, it's the probability of one proposition given or assuming some other proposition. So you might ask, what's the probability that Mr. A will live to be 70, given that, on the condition that he is now 35, enormously overweight, eats nothing but junk food, doesn't watch his diet at all, and gets absolutely no exercise? Well, maybe that probability is fairly low. On the other hand, you might say, what's the probability that Mr. B will live to be 70, given that Mr. B is now 65, runs 10 miles every day, watches his diet like a hawk, and has grandparents, all of whom live to be over 100? That probability is going to be a lot higher, all right? The conditional probability, the probability of one proposition on another proposition taken as condition. You might say, what's the probability that Jock is a Mormon, given that Jock lives in Glasgow, Scotland? Probably not too high. Not very many Mormons in Glasgow. What's the probability that Brigham is a Mormon, given that Brigham lives in Salt Lake City? That probability is going to be much higher, all right? So you get the idea of conditional probability. Well, now, I say here then in the note, perhaps Darwin and Churchland mean to propose that a certain conditional probability is low, the probability of human cognitive faculties being reliable, given that human cognitive faculties have been produced by evolution, Dawkins' blind evolution, the blind watchmaker, unguided by the hand of God or any other person. If naturalistic evolution is true, then our cognitive faculties will have resulted from blind mechanisms like natural selection, working on sources of genetic variation like random genetic mutation. And the ultimate purpose or function, Churchland's chore of our cognitive faculties, if they have a purpose or function, will be survival of individual or species or gene or genotype. But then it's unlikely that they have the production of true beliefs as a function. So the probability of our faculties being reliable, given naturalistic evolution, would be fairly low. And so what I'm arguing here is we can write it like that: a probability of R given N and E, right? The probability of one proposition given another. The probability of R given N and E, where N is metaphysical naturalism, the view that there's no such person as God. And crucial to this view, of course, is, well, here it says, there's no such person as God, as the God of traditional theism, where E is the proposition that our cognitive faculties have arisen by way of evolution, and where R is the claim that our faculties are reliable. So our question is this: what's the probability of R given N and E? And what I propose to argue, following Darwin and Churchland here, is that that probability is relatively low. So now, section 1 under B then, the doubt developed. So suppose we think, first of all, not about ourselves and our ancestors. It's harder to think about this question in thinking about ourselves because we naturally assume that our cognitive faculties are reliable, and we sort of import that assumption into the discussion. So let's think instead about a hypothetical population of creatures rather like ourselves on a planet similar to Earth, just as Darwin proposed that we think about another species, such as monkeys, when he gives his statement of this problem. All right? Suppose these creatures have cognitive faculties, they hold beliefs, they change beliefs, they make inferences, and so on. And suppose these creatures have arisen by way of the selection processes endorsed by contemporary evolutionary thought. What's the probability that their faculties are reliable? So let's suppose that naturalism holds for these creatures, and that E also holds. What's P of R on N and E, specified not to us, but to them, to these creatures? Okay, that's our question. Well, now, the first thing to see, of course, is that it's probably likely that their behavior is adaptive. Their behavior is fitness enhancing, but nothing so far follows about their beliefs. Everything really depends on the relation between belief and behavior, right? As to what we can expect, as to what this probability is with respect to them. And what I want to do next is think of 4 different situations, 4 different ways that behavior and belief can be related. And I want to argue that the probability of R on each of those 4, together with N and E, is low, or at least not very high. And that will enable me to conclude that the probability of R on N and E simpliciter, N and E in itself, is fairly low. All right? So then there'll be 4 possibilities. I'll just kind of skip one of the 4, but there will be 4. And the first of these is epiphenomenalism, which is rather a mouthful. Epiphenomenalism. That's a good term to use in case you get in a dispute with your parents or your wife or husband. You can, if you're starting to lose the argument, you can say, "Oh well, you're just an epiphenomenalist," and turn on your heel and leave. All right. This term was first produced by T.H. Huxley, who was a friend of Darwin's. He was called Darwin's bulldog, and that's because Darwin himself was rather a shy, retiring person who did not like mean, nasty intellectual disputes. He didn't like that sort of thing. But given the sort of thing he said, he often was involved in them. So he would take Huxley along, and then when things got really tough, when people started really attacking him, he would say, "Sick 'em, Huxley," and he'd turn the argument over to Huxley. So he came to be called Darwin's bulldog. Now, T.H. Huxley said what he thinks the way things go with respect to belief and behavior is that beliefs don't cause behavior at all. Beliefs don't get into the causal chain leading to behavior. He likened the relation between beliefs and mental life generally to the body. He said this is sort of similar to the relation of the whistle of a steam engine, and by the whistle I don't mean the device that produces the whistle, but just the whistle itself, the sound, to the steam engine. It's not that the whistle has any causal impact on the steam engine, rather the whistle is caused by the steam engine. So if that's the way it were with respect to beliefs, then if beliefs didn't cause behavior at all, then although evolution can modify behavior, it wouldn't be able to modify belief in the direction of true beliefs. Belief would be, you might say, evolution would be invisible to evolution. And then the fact that these creatures, that during their evolutionary history they came to have beliefs, that would confer no probability at all on the idea that these beliefs are mostly true or mostly nearly true rather than being wildly false. Indeed, the probability of their being mostly true would have to be estimated as fairly low, because for their beliefs to be mostly true, say for 75% of them to be true, if it were the case that for any particular one belief the probability that it's true is a half, then if they had, say, 1,000 beliefs, the probability that 3/4 of them would be true, and that would certainly be a rather low requirement for reliability, that probability would be extremely low, something like 10 to the minus 59th, I think it is. Okay? So it could be that one of these creatures believes he's at that elegant, bibulous Oxford dinner, when in fact he's slogging his way through some primeval swamp, desperately fighting off hungry crocodiles. J.M. Smith, the famous biologist, a few years ago, Time magazine wrote a piece about J.M. Smith, and in it they said this. They said a few years ago, J.M. Smith wrote, John Maynard Smith, they had never understood why organisms have feelings. After all, he says, orthodox biologists believe that behavior, however complicated, however complex, is governed entirely by biochemistry. So what causes behavior will be biochemical reactions in the brain and nervous system, and that the attendant sensations, fear, pain, wonder, love, we might add belief, are just shadows cast by that biochemistry, not themselves vital to the organism's behavior, not themselves causing behavior on the part of the organism. All right? So that's one of these four possibilities then for the relation between belief and behavior. Now, a second one, this second one is probably the hardest one to wrap one's mind around here. The second one, let's think of it like this. If you are a naturalist, you will also